On a remote, windswept island, shrouded in mist and legend, a story centuries in the making was reaching its final, breathtaking chapter. This was more than just an excavation. It was the culmination of a quest that had consumed generations. A quest spanning decades, driven by a whispered curse, a persistent legend, and an unyielding dream of uncovering one of history's greatest lost treasures. For years, this small patch of land had been the focal point for countless expeditions, each one ending in disappointment, each failure adding another layer to the island's mystique. But for the team gathered here, under the cold glare of the floodlights, the past was merely a prologue. They were the inheritors of this grand obsession, armed with technology their predecessors could only have imagined. Yet, the weight of history and the ghosts of past failures hung heavy in the salt-laced air. After years of their own painstaking work, battling against financial pressures, technical setbacks, and the island's unforgiving geology, the project was on the brink of collapse. Funding had all but evaporated. The operational window was closing. The team knew, with a certainty that was both terrifying and electrifying, that this was the final cut. There would be no second chances. Everything hinged on this single, audacious attempt. The plan was born from a radical new interpretation of the historical data, combined with ground-penetrating radar surveys that hinted at an anomaly far deeper than anyone had previously dared to drill. The target, a small, precisely calculated point, 160 feet below the surface, through layers of dense clay, shifting sediment, and solid bedrock. It was an immense engineering challenge, pushing their custom-built drill rig to its absolute operational limits. The risks were enormous. A single miscalculation, a sheared drill bit, or a borehole collapse would mean catastrophic failure. The hours ticked by. On the surface, the crew worked in a state of heightened focus, their movements economical and precise. Below ground, the tungsten carbide drill bit chewed relentlessly through the earth. Inside the control hub, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Every subtle change in the data, every new vibration reported by the sensors was scrutinized. They were drilling blind, guided only by faith in their calculations and the digital whispers sent back from the abyss. Then they reached the target depth. The main drilling was complete. Now came the most delicate phase of the operation. The final piece of steel, a custom-fabricated casing designed to protect the borehole and guide the camera probe, was meticulously prepared. This was the conduit to the unknown, the last physical link between their world and the one that had remained hidden for centuries. With painstaking care, the final segment was locked into place and lowered into the deep, dark void. A hush fell over the entire site. The roar of the main drill was replaced by the quiet hum of the winch, a sound that seemed to amplify the crushing weight of expectation. Down it went, foot by agonizing foot. The camera relayed a disorienting view of murky water and sediment. 150 feet, 155. The team held its collective breath, their eyes fixed on the grainy, monochromatic feed. They were searching for any sign, any deviation from the solid rock and clay they had drilled through. And then, the sound. It wasn't loud. It was a subtle, resonant, transmitted up the fiber optic cable and translated into a sharp spike on the audio monitor. A sound that did not belong in the natural geological world. The operator gently nudged the probe forward. Again, the contact was solid, unyielding. On the screen, the murky water began to clear slightly, revealing not rock, but a flat, uniform surface. It was the unmistakable sound, and now the unmistakable sight, of metal hitting a sealed vault. After all the years, all the failures, all the frustration, they had found it. In that single, heart-stopping moment, the legend became real, and the dream of generations was finally, miraculously, within their grasp. For centuries, this space had known only silence, a void sealed from the world, holding its breath. As the probe descended, breaking the surface of the murky water, it pierced not just a physical barrier, but a temporal one. The team watched, transfixed, as their remote eyes pushed through the darkness. Inside the chamber, the air was still, the water disturbed for the first time in perhaps 800 years. Every slight movement of the probe sent clouds of fine sediment billowing like ghosts, each particle a grain of history. The tension in the control room was palpable, a collective intake of breath, waiting for the light to find something, anything. And then, it did. The first shape emerged from the gloom. Not a natural rock formation, but the unmistakable straight edge of a man-made object. As the light swept across its surface, the vision was spectacular. A large timber chest, bound with heavy iron straps, its form softened by a thick blanket of silt. It was a sight that defied all odds, a confirmation that their years of tireless work had not been in vain. This was no mere debris. This was a cache. The team could only stare, momentarily speechless, as the camera panned, revealing not one, but several such chests, arranged with a clear sense of purpose. One of the chests had partially collapsed, its contents spilling onto the chamber floor. The camera's beam caught the unmistakable luster of gold. But these were not the uniform discs of modern currency. They were hammered coins, their edges irregular, their surfaces worn smooth by the passage of time and human hands. Yet, even in this initial glimpse, it was clear this was more than just a hoard of bullion. Intermingled with the gold were other shapes, other materials. Not just coins, but relics. The faint outline of what might be a ceremonial chalice, the dark, solid form of a lead-sealed container, perhaps holding a priceless manuscript, protected from the damp. The team needed to be certain. The historical implications were too immense for speculation. They maneuvered the probe's high-resolution camera towards the most intact chest, its lid still firmly in place. And there, preserved beneath the fine layer of silt, was the specific, undeniable proof. Templar symbols carved into the wooden chests. The iconic cross pate, its arms narrow at the center and flaring outwards, was deeply incised into the oak. This was the sigil of the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. The Knights Templar. Every detail aligned with historical records. The style of the carvings, the construction of the chests, the very nature of the items hinted at within. This wasn't pirate loot, hastily buried and crudely marked. This was a deliberate, ritualistic deposit. The precision of the carvings and the careful arrangement of the hoard spoke of a disciplined, organized effort, consistent with the military order famed for its logistical prowess. Pirates stole treasure. The Templars were guardians of it, protecting the wealth of Christendom. What the probe was revealing was not a pirate's bounty, but a sacred trust. The camera pulled back, widening its view to encompass the entire scene. A silent, underwater vault filled with the legacy of a lost order. The full weight of the moment began to settle upon the team. For over 2 centuries, the world has speculated about what became of the Templar fleet and its vast riches upon the Order's brutal suppression in 1307. Legends placed it everywhere from Scotland to the Holy Land. But no one had ever found definitive proof. Until now. This was the legendary missing treasure of the Knights Templar. Once the initial euphoria of discovery subsided, the monumental task of cataloguing and valuation began. A consortium of the world's leading financial auditors, historians, and antiquities experts was assembled. Their initial reports were filled with a palpable sense of disbelief. The financial auditors, accustomed to dealing in billions, were stunned, not merely by the scale, but by the unprecedented nature of the find. How do you assign a monetary value to items that have been the stuff of legend for nearly 700 years? The challenge was immense, requiring a multi-layered approach that went far beyond simple market rates for gold and silver. The first layer of assessment was metallurgical. The sheer tonnage of precious metals was staggering. Gold and silver ingots, stamped with period-correct assay marks, were subjected to rigorous analysis. The purity was exceptionally high, consistent with the known wealth of the Templar Order at its zenith. But it was the coinage that provided the most direct link. Thousands of gold florins, silver deniers, and Byzantine hyperpyra, all dating from before the Order's dissolution in 1312. Each coin was a data point, a tangible piece of economic history. Alongside the bullion, chests of uncut gemstones were uncovered, sapphires from the Far East, emeralds likely sourced from Egypt. Each stone told a story of ancient trade routes and the Templars' vast international network. The second and far more complex layer of valuation was provenance. This is where the treasure's true significance began to emerge. Among the chests were ceremonial artifacts, chalices, reliquaries, and processional crosses, whose craftsmanship was exquisite. But more valuable still were the documents. Vellum scrolls and leather-bound ledgers, preserved in sealed cylinders, detailed financial transactions, land ownership, and correspondence between Templar preceptories across Europe and the Holy Land. These weren't just historical curiosities, they were the Order's missing archives. For historians, this was the equivalent of finding a lost library of antiquity. The provenance was undeniable, adding a multiplier to the value that was impossible to quantify in purely financial terms. Finally, the team had to consider the market context. What would this collection fetch if, hypothetically, it were to be sold? They consulted with major auction houses and private collectors. The consensus was that no single institution or individual could afford the entire collection. Its value transcended the art market. It was a matter of world heritage. Based on the historical value of the authenticated artifacts, the sheer volume of precious metal, and the unparalleled provenance confirmed by the recovered documents, the final valuation is staggering: $400 million. A conservative estimate, as many experts argued that the collection's cultural and historical importance made it, in a very real sense, priceless. This wasn't just a discovery of gold, it was the recovery of a lost chapter of history, the single greatest treasure haul in modern history. For the generations of searchers who had poured their lives and fortunes into this quest, it was validation. For the world, it was a moment that would redefine our understanding of the past. This was the ultimate payday, not just in wealth, but in knowledge. The curse is broken, the mystery is solved. The Lagina Brothers finally found the $400 million Templar treasure. Their place in history is cemented forever. Please subscribe to our channel, History Documentary, hub for more insightful videos and intriguing content.